August 15th, 2024. I call the hearing to order at 1 o'clock p.m. Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call. Chair Bauke,
Here.
Vice Chair Wardlow,
Here.
Commissioner Barnwell,
Here.
Commissioner Boss is absent, Commissioner DeLuccio,
Here.
Commissioner Lodge,
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes, here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to preliminary matters. First is request for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or additions of ex-agenda items. Ms. Harkenega, do we have any of those?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. We do have one. The project prior that was previously agendized for today at 2327 Edgewater Way has been postponed again indefinitely, so it will not be on today's agenda.
Okay, thank you. Next is announcements and appeals. Do we have any of those?
No, Chair Bauke.
Okay, next is review, consideration, and actions of draft minutes. We have none on the calendar. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're going to move on next to public comments pertaining to items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any speaker slips or folks online that would like to speak?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement. We also do not have any virtual participants at this time, and we didn't receive any general written correspondence, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bauke.
Okay, with that, we'll close general public comment and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is a concept review and initiation request for 1 Hot Springs Road. The purpose of this hearing today is initiation, discussion, and to determine whether this project generally meets city policies, identify potential zoning and land use designation changes, and provide the applicant with comments on the proposal. Let's have a staff presentation. Will be given by project planner Kathleen Kennedy. Ms. Kennedy, the floor is yours, and you can begin.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. Thank you, Commissioners. Again, my name is Kathy Kennedy, project planner for this project. So this hearing today involves 1 Hot Springs Road, and we are going to discuss the initiation and concept review of a proposed project. So here's the location of 1 Hot Springs Road, here outlined in yellow. This is approximately 2.4 acres in size. It's at the east end of the city. You'll notice here the city limits in purple. So that is a parcel owned by the Cemetery Association, and right across the street is the cemetery in the county jurisdiction. It's also located, of course, next to Highway 101, and to the left here, the bird refuge. So the purpose of the hearing today is for 2 reasons. And the initiation. So if the commissioners support having multi-unit housing on this site, the first step to move the project forward would be to decide whether to initiate a zone change and a land use designation change. And we're recommending a zone change from R1 to R3 and a land use designation change from parks open space to medium density residential. This allows the applicant to move forward with the project. This would not, at this point, approve the zone change or land use designation change. It would just allow them to move forward. And then the concept review of their proposed 22-unit housing project. And no appealable decisions will be made at the hearing today. Just a brief project summary that I'll give you at this time. So it's a 22-unit residential development comprised of 2- and 3-story townhouses. There'll be 5 studios, 5 2-bedroom units, and 12 3-bedroom units. 20%, 4 units, would be restricted to low-income households. The average unit size is approximately 1,420 square feet, and the proposed density is 11 dwelling units per acre. So if you decide to approve the initiation, these would be the discretionary actions that would follow. So the project would come back to the Planning Commission for a setback modification, and I'll go over the setback modification request, and a coastal development permit. And then at that hearing, the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to City Council for the following: the local coastal program amendment for the coastal land use designation change, and also the same amendment for a zoning map amendment change. like to give you just a little background on this. Housing application was submitted back in November of 2023 under the preliminary housing application that we have in the city per Senate Bill 330. So that locks in the development fees and standards at the time of application submittal. It requires that the applicant submit a formal planning application within 180 days, which they did in May of this year. When they submitted that application, they also invoked the builder's remedy because at that time our housing element was not adopted. To qualify for the builder's remedy, the project must have 20% lower income, which this project does, or 100% moderate income restricted units. If this project was in the inland, not in the coastal zone, the city at that point could not deny a project that's inconsistent with the general plan or zoning ordinance, meaning no rezone would be required. But in this case, because it is in the coastal zone, and this builder's remedy does not supersede the Coastal Act, they still need to go forward with this land use designation change and the rezone. And then currently, the project does not request any waivers of any zoning requirements that would be potentially allowed under builder's remedy. In regard to the site overall, there are a couple of things I wanted to share with you. So over here to the right, there's a kind of a large triangular piece called out here. This area would be acquired by the city as part of the East Cabrillo Boulevard widening project. So this amount here would be removed from the project site. This other little triangular parcel, it's a separate parcel here, is owned by the city. And this would be potentially transferred to the project to move forward. And you'll see how this is included in the project scope. And then here to the left, as you know, there's a historic fountain, a city landmark at the corner here. It's on the project site, although a portion of like the driveway to it is in the city right-of-way. So potentially this lot line would change as well to have the fountain within the city public right-of-way versus on the private property. So a couple of these things need to be worked through further, and the applicant and property owner is working with the city on these items. And also, of course, the Highway 101 project, the segment 4E North is in this area. I just wanted to point out this area here is the project site. This shows the widening of Cabrillo Boulevard, how it does encroach into this parcel. The point of this is showing that you have the railroad here and the new improvements for the highway. They would not affect this project. So in terms of the initiation, again, this would be required to propose a multi-unit housing project on the site. The existing zoning is R1, which is one family residence in the coastal zone. So the proposed project, of course, exceeds the allowable density and is inconsistent with the zoning requirements. So the proposed zoning designation would be R3, which allows multiple family residents. The proposed project would comply with the R3 regulations. And we're not recommending HRC2, which would allow the residential units, but it also allows hotels. That is the zoning designation shown here across the street. Of course, it would be consistent with that, but staff is recommending just the R3 because that would allow the housing and not the hotels and other uses. In regard to the coastal land use designation change, the existing designation is parks open space. Of course, it does not allow residential uses, and the city-owned triangular parcel that I pointed out earlier is parks open space as well. The city does not have any park use plan for that area. The proposed designation is medium-density residential, which would be 12 dwelling units per acre. This would be consistent with the R3 zone. The proposed density for the project is 11, so it would be consistent with that. I'll show you the East Beach component area, which this is located in. Project site over here to the right in green indicates the park's open space. Across the street, again, is designated by 2 here. This would also, like I said, allow hotels as well as residential. And we're recommending a medium-density residential designation. And switching over to concept review of the proposed project itself. Here's an overview of the proposed project. It's a 22-unit project. It consists of 7 separate buildings. They're 2 and 3 stories. Half of them are 2-story, so that would be 11 units would be 2-story, and 11 units would be 3-story. And the applicant will also go through this project somewhat. I'm going to go through a few of their slides. Here is the first floor, ground level. If you look in the upper right side here, you'll notice a cell site. If you were at the site, you did notice that was existing, and that will remain. Again, in the corner here is a dog run in the common open space area. There are a few setback encroachments proposed on the first floor. And these are relatively minor, 8 inches to a foot into the setbacks. So here on the left side, we have Unit 11 has a minor encroachment into the interior. This would be the front setback for Cabrillo. And then units 14 and a few other units along the back here area are encroaching just a minor amount into the setback. For the second floor, again, a number of minor encroachments into the setbacks, Unit 11, and some more along the back here near the railroad. Third floor, this indicates, you can see that there are 11 that are only 2-story, and then the other 11 are 3-story buildings. One encroachment is the trellis here on this Unit 10, encroaching into the front yard setback. And the roof plan for the project. And I'll just go through quickly the elevations. So at the top here is the Channel Drive elevation. So on the left side would be the corner, it rounds to Cabrillo Boulevard. Below is the Cabrillo Boulevard elevation. So on the right would be where the new roundabout is. And to the left would be close to the freeway. And the Highway 101 elevation looking from the freeway towards the project site. In regard to public improvements, there will be a sidewalk. So there's a 4-foot wide parkway proposed, a 6-foot wide sidewalk, and then a 2.5-foot high retaining wall along the property, along Channel Drive. There are a number of trees on the site. There are only 2 native oak trees that would be removed. They're noted here in the center of the site. Those would be removed, and 6 new native oak trees would be replaced or planted for replacement. Just briefly showing you the landscape plan for the project here. Sorry about that. In terms of zoning consistency, the proposed project does comply with the zoning ordinance for the R3 zone, except for the setback encroachments, and they are, as I said, requesting a modification for those. In terms of the general plan and coastal zone consistency, the project would be consistent with our affordable housing and housing goals and policies. And more detail about that is attached to your staff report. We haven't conducted our environmental review completely yet, although we've requested a number of studies. They're included here: archaeology report, a noise analysis, geotechnical, risk assessment because of its location next to the railroad. Also, they must comply with the design standards for air quality because they're within the 200-foot buffer of the freeway. So I'm providing you with the next steps. So if this project moves forward after the initiation, it would go to the Historic Landmarks Commission for concept review. Staff would do a completeness environmental review as standard. And then we'd come before the Planning Commission for the setback modification and coastal development permit, as I mentioned before, and a recommendation to the City Council on the zone and coastal land use changes. That would go to City Council for review and approval, and if it's approved at that point, it would go to the California Coastal Commission for review and approval of the local coastal program amendment, and then at that point, it would go to the Historic Landmarks Commission for project design and final approvals. So we have some questions for you today. I put in this staff report. Number one being, is the project site suitable for a housing project? Of course, single family is allowed, so referring to a multi-unit housing project. Is the proposed residential density appropriate as proposed? And then do you support the initiation, the rezone to R3 and the land use designation change to medium density, 12 units per acre? And then do you have any comments on the proposed project plans? And I have a recommended motion that we can pull up later if you would like. Our recommendation is to initiate the zone change, initiate the coastal land use designation change, and with the following comments. And at that point, you would provide comments on the project. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kennedy. We'll next go with the applicant. You have 15 minutes. Please state your name for the record, and if you have other members of your team, please have them also state their name for the record when they come to the microphone.
Great.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Holland. I am the applicant and developer of the proposed project at 1 Hot Springs Road. First, I want to thank the planning commissioners and city staff for their time today and for considering the project and the requested zoning amendments. I also want to give a special thanks to our planner, Kathy Kennedy, for helping my team get to this point in the process and for her comments this afternoon. Supporting me today is Mark Kirkhart and Jason Greer from Design Arc, our architect of record, Robert Schmidt of Flowers and Associates, our civil engineer, Scott Capps from EPT Design, our landscape architect, and Rick Hoffman, a longstanding board member of the Santa Barbara Cemetery Association, which is the fee owner of the property. I want to note that our entire design team is headquartered or has significant presence here in Santa Barbara with decades of experience successfully executing projects here on the Central Coast. I want to start by giving you a little bit of context in history before passing the baton off to our design team. 1 Hot Springs Road has been privately owned by the Santa Barbara Cemetery Association for over 120 years. For the majority of that time, the property contained at least 2 residential structures that were used to house cemetery staff. Around 1980, these structures were demolished, and the property has since sat vacant. Today, the property holds special significance for the cemetery. As many of you know, the cemetery has only a limited number of grave sites left they can sell. And in case you were wondering, I've asked if they can offer me a special pricing on a gravesite, and they promptly rejected my request. Yet each year, the cemetery's operating costs continue to escalate. What does this mean? It means that in some point in the near term, the cemetery will reach an inflection point where its future or its expenses exceed its revenues. Therefore, this project is absolutely critical to ensure the long-term viability of the cemetery without seeking public or any other outside subsidy. Put simply, it will provide the cemetery with an income stream that's hedged against inflation. In our collective view, the project is a win-win-win for the city, the cemetery, and for the residents of Santa Barbara. For the city, the project is consistent with the primary goals set forth in the housing element of creating new housing units and prioritizing the creation of new affordable units. Of course, it will also provide additional tax revenue. As I mentioned a minute ago, for the cemetery, this project provides security and a revenue stream sufficient to offset its growing costs. And for city residents, yes, it provides new housing units, but it also provides an architecture and design ethos that's quintessentially Santa Barbara. At 22 units, this is one of the lowest density multifamily projects in the city's current entitlement pipeline. And with 4 designated affordable units, the project exceeds the city's current minimum. And some of you might be wondering, why only 22 units? Why not build more? We actually started with a much larger project and looked at several different schemes ranging from 40, 50 to 60 units, and we simply felt that the scale and massing of a larger project would be overwhelming of the site and not in keeping with the immediate surroundings. Moreover, significantly greater density would require subterranean parking, which is not viable from a cost perspective. With that, I'll bring up Mark Kirkhart from our design team to walk you through design details. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Mark Kirkhart, Principal of Design Arc. We're the architects of record for the project with Brian. Been before you many times. I know that this hearing is really more about the land use issues and getting this project to move forward, but I thought I would give you just a little bit of a sneak peek of kind of where we're headed with the design, and hopefully maybe get a few comments from you on these modifications that we're proposing. So everyone pretty familiar with the site. I can tell you that when Brian first approached us about this property, I remember, geez, I've ridden my bike by that site hundreds of times, and I never even knew that property was there. I think that's probably the same for most of us. But it's actually quite a lovely piece of property when you get up on it, and it has a great opportunity of south exposure facing across at the open space of the cemetery. Oh, you're going backwards. Use this one. There we go. Oh. Okay, gotta use this one. So the way the project is oriented on the site, we're incorporating the concept of a Vernerf, which you probably have heard about. It's a Dutch term that really means living street. And so the access to the units through that interior street is intended to be a slow-moving space that is shared between pedestrians and autos. And so when you look at the design, it has a lot of interior planters in the middle of the street, kind of to indicate traffic calming. We have a lot of trees overhanging and so forth, so it'll be a very lovely and usable street. So here you can see we have our point of access is at the far east end, so it doesn't prove any kind of conflict with the access to the cemetery. We have two additional pedestrian access points, one down towards what we have is our cul-de-sac turnaround, and another one in the middle of the property where residents and visitors alike can actually access the central circulation. So what wasn't mentioned, we have 7 buildings, a total of 22 units. The 2 and 3 bedroom units have 2 car garages. The studio has a 1-car carport that we're actually considering might evolve into a garage by the time we get back to you to actually review the design. And then in addition to that, we've got 10 guest parking spaces on site. Kathleen showed the streetscape. So our approach was really kind of a Mediterranean village. This is, of course, because it's part of the HLC, it's one of the entry points into Santa Barbara, and so we really wanted to, express the Spanish colonial revival design aesthetic and kind of end up with a project that looks like a Mediterranean village. And as is mentioned, half of the units are 3-story townhouses, the other are 2-story townhouses. There's also a combination of a number of roof decks that'll have great opportunities for views out towards to the bird refuge, as well as views to the south. And because we know we're against the railroad and the highway, we're basically turning our back. Those units along the north side will turn their back to those uses, so their outdoor space will be on the south side of their building, so that we're actually using the architecture to give us the required reduction in sound to get our outdoor noise levels within the required levels. We overlaid as the plans aren't completely finished. As you know, the roundabout's under construction, but the plans for the expansion of Cabrillo under the railroad tracks and under the freeway are still in the works. But from the preliminary information, we overlaid this on our site just so you could kind of get an idea of how much property our owner is going to be deeding to the city in order to construct those improvements. So actually, the preliminary line that is shown of the take, would you call that on the site plan, we don't think it might actually change a little bit to be more consistent with the actual orientation of the on-ramps. So the one modification that we were talking about on the one unit, which is on the, I guess that would be the northwest corner, might not actually be necessary when that line of the actual take of the property is given. So these are some 3-dimensional views of the project. This would be from the roundabout, looking at the corner. We haven't modeled it, but the fountain, which is going to be restored, that will be completely maintained by the owner as well, by us for the city. And this gives you an idea how the streetscape going down Channel Drive looks. So there is a bit of a bank. As you probably know from driving by the site, the actual property is somewhat elevated above Channel Drive, so we're taking advantage of that. The units will kind of spill off that little hill and all have patios facing the south. This is the entry into the project, combination of 2- and 3-story buildings. Once again, this isn't fully landscaped yet, but I can tell you that with EPT, we have our eyes set on a pretty high level of landscape within this Vernerf kind of shared street, pedestrian and street driveway. This kind of gives you an idea of what that would look like in a preliminary way. There's an island in the middle so that the street splits into 2 one-way lanes. And it kind of, you can see it gives kind of a meandering look that I think is really consistent with the kind of the Santa Barbara vernacular, what we'd like to see for a residential project. Next one. Is that it? Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of our presentation. Like I say, you will be seeing much more detail on the architecture when we actually come back for that portion of the review. But obviously, we would look forward to your forwarding this recommendation that the planners have made in terms of getting the zone change and the land use designation changed. Thank you.
Mr. Kerhart, come back to, I believe Commissioner Barnwell had a question for you. Is that correct? He can wait. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
Okay, I'm here if you have any questions.
Any other members of your team are going to speak at this point? Are you done? Okay, good. All right, so we're going to move on to public comments on the project. Do we have any in-person speaker slips or folks online that would like to speak?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement. We also do not have any virtual participants at this time, but we did receive written correspondence from David Fishbane, Joseph Miller, and Harry Fowler that was distributed to the commission prior to the hearing. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bauke.
Okay, so then we're going to move to the question period. Mr. Barnwell, would you like to start since you were in the queue, followed by Commissioner DeLucia?
Well, for starters, there's a lot of things going for you guys, not the least of which is the very coolest street address in the whole town. Number 1 Hot Springs. I didn't know there was such a thing. I applaud everything that you're doing. You didn't address, and I wondered if I'm sure you thought about it, the railroad, both the sound component and probably the homeless component, which ends up being a variety of whatever those, a combination maybe of landscaping and wall space, but I'm sure you've thought about that. I know these are very preliminary drawings.
Yeah. Well, we are, Mr. Barnwell, we are proposing a sound wall along that north property line, 6 to 8 feet tall, to keep transients out, for one thing, but there'll be landscape incorporated in that as well. And of course, we have, in the process of preparing an acoustic report, and there'll be very specific recommendations. We've done plenty of projects in settings like this, where we can mitigate the sound to get it within the interior, within the right levels. And as far as the exterior levels I mentioned, we're putting those on the south side of the building. So I think we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to get there.
And a couple of more questions, if I may. The fountain, of course, is of interest to everyone. The staff report says that it's anticipated to be put on city property, and then you just suggested that you will be maintaining it. Is that how it's going to go out?
Our understanding, based on discussions with the city attorney's office, is that there will be a land swap effectuated by the end of the year, and then a maintenance agreement whereby we continue to maintain the fountain even though the city controls the ownership of the parcel.
Okay. You mentioned parking also. Something I'm going to become a bore on is bicycle parking and the anticipation of society in 20 years with larger bicycles that may become primary vehicles for people. How are you addressing that bicycle parking?
That's the reason that we like having the garages for all these units, and including that. That's one of the considerations for enclosing the current carports on the one-bedroom units and having enough depth to be able that people could store bicycles in the garages.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner DeLucia.
Thank you. Thank you. You've done a lot of work on this already, so that's appreciated. And the design looks nice. However, I know it's going to go before HLC, and they'll be working with you on the design ultimately. And before us is, I guess, the zone change. And I have a couple of questions. Maybe you can help me. I know there's going to be a land swap for some of the land, and you talked about the land where the fountain was. You didn't, and I'm looking at the letter that was written. I don't know if you wrote the letter,
I do.
the applicant letter. It doesn't mention about the land that you will be swapping. The city will be giving you in change on that further along on that property.
So the project right now covers the triangular portion, which is currently owned by the city. And so the assumption is that the swap would be a like-for-like parcel exchange. So the city would give us the triangular portion at the planned south side of our project, and then the city would be deeded the fountain parcel on the corner of Cabrillo.
The city will be deeded for the improvement in Cabrillo, the portion on the corner.
No, they're actually separate, and so I think what you're referring to, Commissioner, is the taking that's required to widen Cabrillo.
Right.
Is roughly a half an acre. We're in preliminary discussions with the city, along with the cemetery right now, for a negotiated taking.
Right, and what are you getting in return? What kind?
We don't know.
Are you getting some property
We
in
don't
return?
know yet. That's
I thought the staff report mentioned that there was going to be some property on the other side of that, of the parcel that they were going to get that the city owned, or did city owned?
So the city-owned property is the small triangular portion, the part of the fountain area. So there's 3 different areas. Essentially, the swap would be the small triangular and the fountain swapping. And then separately would be the widening of Cabrillo, the larger half-acre.
Okay, because that wasn't all, I didn't get all that from the, what you call that in your letter here.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, I haven't been over there, I guess, that often, because I don't even know what that fountain is, and I'm going to go look for that fountain.
Yeah.
'Cause it does sound really nice. And also in the applicant's letter, you mentioned about at one point, the city was not in compliance with the housing element. And I think the staff can answer this question, that we had not at some point identified enough parcels to meet the RENA numbers, but have we since, for low and mod, we have since met those numbers, correct? We have excess parcels in order to achieve the RENA numbers for low and mod?
I can't speak to that, actually, as a separate, larger issue.
Commissioner DeLucia, I'm not sure we can answer that. If you can restate maybe the
I think
question.
the question, the applicant said in the draft that one of the HCD's concerns to the city was that it failed to identify enough vacant land parcels in this housing element. HCD said that failed to identify enough vacant land parcels in the housing element. So you had to come up with 8,001 units we had to identify, correct? We have identified in excess of that number today, right?
So because that is from the applicant's letter, I'd rather they speak to that statement. As far as the city's housing element, it was adopted and we identified the 8,001. I think what the reference is that this site wasn't considered even as part of the land that was identified, so it'd be in addition to the land.
I understand that, yes. So maybe I need to ask you the question.
The spirit of the comment was one of the original pieces of feedback from HCD was that the city had failed to identify enough vacant land parcels. This is an obvious vacant land parcel, and we're trying to solve a problem.
I understand that.
So,
But I think the city is in excess of the number they need potentially to meet the RENA number. So I guess I may ask staff, so if they do develop this parcel within the cycle and there's 4 low-income units, we can still count those, right, toward what we need to achieve?
Commissioner DeLucia, yes, we can still count them. In essence, we just need to keep track of, and what the housing element requires in HCD is that we keep track of what our allocation is and ensuring that we are committing to providing that within the review cycle.
Okay, so now I'll get to the modification. That's the real thing here. I didn't understand the modification too well. I know you said you're asking for a few modifications, but I'm looking at it, looks like you're looking for modifications for a number of the units. So I guess I'm going to ask, why do you need these modifications? Because you didn't really touch on that, I don't think, in the presentation.
Yeah. Can you turn on this so I can use this for example? So they're strictly for architectural integrity, if you will, and most of them are above the ground level, and none of the modifications are adding any square footage of livable area. So a good example of this would be the corner unit on the right-hand side here has a trellis on the third floor where the trellis column is proud of the face of the building by about 12 inches. And so that 12 inches would actually be extending into the required setback between, so rather than squeeze the unit and try to make it smaller or whatever, we're just saying, hey, it's an architectural projection, it's not giving us any additional square footage, it's just adding to the architectural character. And so those types of things will, when we come back, each one will be very specifically pointed out to you. But just in general, we wanted to take your temperature of those kinds of things. And many of them are along the north exposure, next to the railroad tracks, which will just make the project look nicer for the people on Amtrak flying by this project. So it seemed to us, I'd rather have that 12 inches of space in the Vernerf, in the driveway and in landscaping than pulling the buildings all back another foot or so, or 2 feet from the railroad track setback. So once again, when we come back, we'll have each one of those. I think we also are going to ask for a trash enclosure along the north side to be located in that setback so that we can still get the access to in and out of our units. I think so. The idea is we think they're reasonable, they're not excessive, and so they'll be more specific when we come back with our actual final architectural submittal.
And the reason I was asking is because we'd have to make, you want a modification, requesting one, we need to make a finding for the modification. It sounds like it's a potential hardship, with
Yeah.
the railroad and all,
Yeah,
and all that.
Together we'll craft that language, I'm sure.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, next would be Commissioner Wiscombe, followed by Vice Chair Wardrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the presentation. Appreciate it. I'm probably going to jump around here because I've just, I'll start with the Vernerf. Is that, okay. So, Mr. Kirkhart, in the drawings, it indicated that the pedestrian part of the Vernerf, is that right?
Speak Dutch now.
Is going to be, I appreciate the fact that it's all permeable paving, both the vehicular and the pedestrian, so I'll make that comment right up front, but it said that the pedestrian part of the Vernerf would be a different color from the vehicular part, and that's not really shown in your drawings, and I'm trying to figure out if there actually is a pedestrian route and what's the width of it, because it looks like sometimes the vehicular goes right up next to the building and so why the different color, I guess?
Yeah, we haven't articulated that yet on the plans. We have a project with this very same concept under construction now out in Goleta, actually, that we got approved by the county a number of years ago, where we did have a differentiation of the walking surface from the driving surface just by color, same exact material, just kind of pixelates and turns into another color. And we haven't studied it that far, but essentially it's not an additional or a segregated area where people have to walk. It's really, the whole idea is that the car is going very slowly in this driveway because of all the overhanging trees and the driveway planters and so forth, that the cars and the pedestrians actually just share the same space. So it's not like the pedestrians have to walk here and the cars have to go there. It's kind of, you kind of share the same space.
Have you reviewed this with our Public Works Department in terms of whether this meets requirements, or have you not gotten that far yet?
We haven't gotten that far. It's a private driveway. It's really not a street.
Okay.
It's a private driveway, so we're pretty sure we'll be able to do this.
Yeah, but we regulate private driveways too.
What's that? Private driveway, no, it's not a private street, but anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Okay. So that's still because I noticed that the mailbox, what's it called? I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. The community hub. where the mailboxes are, is you have to cross the vehicular part to get there, so, to
Yes.
get to the community hub. So that's why I'm just concentrating on that, because, and your plans do show that there is a delineation in pavement color between the two, between the pedestrians and the vehicular, but I couldn't see it, and I don't know how it can be done, so that's why I was questioning
Yeah.
that.
So it's all on the same elevation, too. There's no
I
elevation change or
understand
anything.
that.
But
No,
we'll show that on the next time we come back.
Okay, that would be great, okay. And then, how will, how will the stormwater be captured and treated? Are you using retention basins underneath I know it's permeable pavement, or is it getting treated as it flows through there, and then?
Yeah, we have the civil engineer here if you want to ask any more specific questions, but generally, we will meet the full stormwater
Okay.
requirements in a combination of permeable paving, and there probably will also be some detention basins, and, planters that will clean the water in. I mean, the whole thing will be fully engineered before we come back to you.
Okay, because we've done, Parks and Rec have done projects in their parking lots using permeable pavers, and so I just wondered, it sounds like you're probably going to do something similar.
Something similar, I
Yeah,
would imagine,
okay,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then, let me see if I have more. I don't know if this is for you or Mr. Holland, what is the mix of the affordable? You have studios, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, so you've got 4 units that are affordable, and what mix are you using?
Preliminarily, the units that you see highlighted in the kind of the light purple here are the units that we're proposing for the affordable units. So it's I think we have 2 studios, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom.
Okay, so 2, 1, and 1, okay, fine. And can you address the ADA access from Channel Drive? Because you're talking about the low 2.5-foot wall, and I know I think I've seen steps on the drawing, but what's the ADA access into the site?
The ADA access will be adjacent to our entrance driveway.
Okay,
And we've
Okay.
actually added that on the plan in a later version. There will actually be a sidewalk that, enters at grade right there next to the entrance.
okay. And then will the what did you call it? Community hub be accessible then? Because that was kind of done in green, so I was just wondering.
At the far end?
There-
Yes,
Where
that
the
will-
mailboxes are. I mean, is this you're going to be ADA friendly?
Correct.
Okay,
We will be ADA friendly.
okay,
We'll meet all the requirements.
fine.
It includes townhouse units townhouse units have to have an accessible bathroom on the ground level and so forth. So I mean, we're fully familiar with all those ADA requirements, and we will meet all those requirements.
Okay, so the connection further down has steps, but the one at the vehicular access entry
Correct.
has.
And we'll have an ADA parking space within the project as well for guests. One of them will be accessible. And I
Okay.
believe we have to have an accessible charging station as well. So
Right.
those will all be incorporated. And that's
Okay, great.
getting way ahead of zone change.
Yeah, well, your drawings were for, where we are in the project were pretty complete, so the questions are a little more annoying than they normally would be at this phase. And then it looks like we're losing a lot of trees, but a lot of non-native trees. That's my understanding from looking at the preliminary plans. So are you planning on 2-to-1 ratio of replacement, or?
Yeah, I'm sure for anything that's native would be replacing at whatever ratio
Well,
is.
there were only a couple
Only a
natives,
couple,
I
yeah,
think,
and,
yeah.
you know-
But what about the other trees? Is that 1-to-1
You look at the-
basis on the other ones?
I don't know if you had a chance to glance at the preliminary landscape plan, but there's literally, we're planting hundreds of trees.
Okay, that would be a good thing when you do bring it back to have that information available.
I have it very
okay,
detailed.
Yeah. Let's see. And the affordable units are 80% of AMI, that's right? Yeah, okay. I had to find that, I didn't know. Oh, and then I think my last question, I think my last question is regarding this risk assessment due to proximity to the Union Pacific Railroad. So what is the risk assessment? What does that mean? I don't know who can answer that question. Yeah.
It's the likelihood that a train would derail and cause risk to our residents. That's in flight right now. DUDEC is preparing that. It'll be ready by the end of the month.
Okay, so you have experience on other sites where the railroad is in close proximity. There's the railroad right-of-way. They own the land on the side of the tracks, and then isn't there a buffer zone or something normally also? Is that right, Ms. Kennedy or Ms. Arciniega?
Well, it would be part of the right-of-way for the railroad.
Okay, and then the sound wall goes up, is that?
Correct.
Okay, so they get all their space, that safety requirement, and then, okay. So the risk assessments for a derailing that
Correct.
could potentially hit your sound wall, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
And then the sound wall would have to tip over and cause risk to people, but yes, very unlikely.
Okay, thank you for the answer to that question. And I think that's all I have at the moment. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really surprised and pleased to see the number of three-bedroom units. I can't recall any of the AUD projects that have been built that had three-bedroom units. Ms. Arciniega, do you?
Commissioner Lodge, I think the one on East Mitchell Terrena might have. It was a condo project, though.
Oh, okay.
That's my last recollection. But yes, not many.
Okay. So that suggests that there will be children living in those units. And are you anticipating that children will be playing in the driveway? Is that part of your thinking in how it's been laid out?
Yes, the project anticipates families living there, and the VUNERF also anticipates play areas. They're not picked up in the latest set of drawings, but we are contemplating having play structures.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's my only question.
Okay, I've got a number of questions, and I'll start off with the representative for the cemetery district. I believe Mr. Hoffman, you were representing them.
Hi, I'm Rick Hoffman. I'm a board member of the cemetery. I'm a 50-year resident. Been on the board for about 10 years. Interesting projects come along. The board thought this through very carefully for many years, trying to figure out how can we get the highest and best use out of that land. We thought about using it as grave plots. It doesn't pencil out at all because of the small size. We would need parking, wide roads. The amount of net acreage or size left for plots would be relatively small. They're one-time sales, then the money would have to go into the endowment care fund, which doesn't generate very much money. Long-term, we're thinking about how can we generate good value for our land to be able to sustain the economic viability of the 150-year-old cemetery into the future. And we've determined that the multi-dwelling project is by far the best way to go. We couldn't do it ourselves. We don't have the expertise. We're not builders. When we were approached by Brian and his group, we carefully looked at them, liked their project, liked their abilities. They're local. We are very happy with them. And as a board, we fully support them and have been now for over almost a couple of years now. We always thought we had a good negotiating position with the city because of the condemnation with Caltrans coming in. Perfectly happy to figure that out. They're taking part of the land, which would even further reduce the economic viability of the remaining piece. It's disconnected from the main part of the cemetery, so the logistics of having that as grave sites would be not good. Parking area, roads, et cetera. We do support it completely. The board is very eager to have this happen for the economic sustainability of the cemetery into the future. When we run out of plots to sell, we have to generate enough money to have an ongoing and ever-increasing budget for forever. So the cemetery board does fully support this, and we appreciate your views on that.
Okay.
Mr. Bauke?
Thank you. I had a number of questions, and you answered a lot of it in your presentation. My first question was, because I presume the thought process of the cemetery having this property way, way back was potentially a location for additional plots, because I know other cemeteries around California run out of space, and then they start hunting for, you look at that with Forest Lawn, they have acquired land and to have more plots. So you're saying that basically your situation is, this doesn't work for plots. What is the situation of the cemetery? When are you going to run out of plots? Could I buy one today? I hear it's full, so maybe that's not a correct.
Well, I'm sorry, it's not full. I called the general manager a couple days ago to ask him that very question, and it's hard to predict. And as we run lower and lower and lower on plots that are available to sell, the overhead stays the same, but the ability to sell goes down through time. But we have to maintain our staff, we have to maintain all of our overhead through at least a full sellout position. And it's hard to predict. I'd say it's a generation away. It's less than a generation away. We're 150 years in, and 20 years, something like that. It's not long in terms of the age of the property.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, because that was one of the first sort of big picture questions, from a community standpoint.
We thought it through
Trying to
pretty
find
carefully. We agree.
cemeteries, and having cemeteries in the community, when they mature, it gets very, very hard to do. And I just wanted to make
It
sure
is.
we weren't, cutting our nose off here just because we want to do a development. But I understand the context of trying to get a revenue stream, especially long term. It's very appropriate.
Yeah. It'll unwind slowly, probably, as we get near the end phase.
Okay. That's the only questions I have for you, Rick. I do have a question for the applicant, if you could come up. And this goes back to your original application letter, talked about both the HRC2 zoning and the R3. And my question to you is, why at this point are you thinking R3 versus the HRC2? Considering
We're agnostic. We're resolute on building multifamily. The advantage of HRC2, it would allow for slightly higher density, but it would also allow us to have a commercial use there if we wanted to do a small restaurant or a coffee shop. I think at this point, given how progressed our plans are, R3 allows for the density that we want to build at the site.
Okay. My concern, honestly, is with the Coastal Commission, with going to them with an R3 proposal. And they're not really always thrilled to do residential in any shape or form. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That you might be
I think
better
we would
off.
defer to the commission on what's going to be the most palatable zoning for the Coastal Commission.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. We got a question for Mr. Kurthart. And there's two things to your project, and you're in preliminary, but I understand the design constraints you've got. First off, I totally appreciate how you've addressed the units that face the railroad and the freeway. You basically turn your back, use that for sound mitigation. I think it's very good. My question to you is the orientation for Building 1 and Building 2 seem to turn its back to the street. And I was wondering what the thought process of that is, because it seems to be inconsistent with the city's, forthcoming ODS design guidelines as to how you approach the frontage of a street.
Just want to make sure we're referring to the right
Yeah, no,
buildings.
that's fine.
You'll plug it in again. Here we go.
So building 1 and building 2?
Yes, as to, what would you describe as the front of those buildings versus the backs? They seem to be sort of a front and back situation, and your front doors at the back,
Yeah,
for
yes.
example.
The front, on those, building 1 and 2, that unit design has the entry off of the driveway side, same, adjacent to the garage entry, say, for example. But then you walk through the unit, and the living rooms will be on the lower part of what diagram you're looking at, on the south side. So they will be in a position to have the view to the south, great south exposure, as well as a view to the cemetery across the street.
Right, and that's my question, because the city's ODS guidelines, which is going to be used by the city to sort of give direction, call for basically the building, at least the frontages of the entry, to be on the street side and not internal when there is a physical public street. And I wasn't sure, this may be something you need to deal with HLC down the road, but I'm throwing that out there as something you might want to look at, maybe actually having an entry scenario on building 1 and 2 that actually operates from the street.
I understand
Okay.
that concept, but I would suggest that would not be nearly as nice of a living arrangement as the way we're proposing it, but we'll take up that argument when we need to.
Okay. And the other one is with the Woofner. Woofners come in all kinds of shapes, forms, and qualities.
Yep.
In Orange County, we have a lot of merchant builders building them, or at least calling them that, and they're not what I would describe as a Woofner, so I want to just throw that out there, that there are cities that actually have come to the conclusion of actually creating design standards. The city of Cotai is an example. They've actually adopted an ordinance in 2022, which actually articulates it so they don't get what I describe as a merchant builder special of that kind of circulation, and it really isn't a pleasant environment for anybody, and it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
But
We understand
you
the
might want to
difference.
go look at that. I see remnants in your illustrations that do a good job of it, but make sure that it really gets to that full standard, which you'll see like in the Dutch situations, which are out there as examples that you
Agreed.
have the
They're not all
pedestrians.
created equal, I understand.
Okay.
But we want this one to be an extra nice one.
Yes, okay. So that's the questions I have for you. I do have a question for staff on 2 things. One is on Channel Drive. Will there be parking along Channel Drive adjacent to this project?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer for that right now. We hadn't discussed that right now. There's some parking. I would expect that there could be some, but
Okay.
we haven't discussed that at this point.
The other question I have is, does the city have a design standard for Channel Drive as to the size of the sidewalk and the size of the parkway that is along Channel Drive?
Yeah, so this has been reviewed by Public Works, Transportation Planning, and this is the design that they're proposing is what we require, the 4-foot parkway and the 6-foot sidewalk.
Yeah, my concern is when you have a parkway that's that small, the 4-foot one, is trees start having a hard time and you end up with lifted sidewalks. And I would suggest there be some discussion and consideration of widening it at least to basically a 5-foot or a 6-foot section. Just, I'll put that out there, but that's why you have sidewalks being lifted, is that we just don't provide enough space for the trees long-term.
We appreciate that comment. If you could, include that in as one of your comments. We appreciate that. Thank you.
The other 2 questions I have is to studies. I didn't see a notation for an air quality study. This property is adjacent to 101 or near enough that it's surely in a particulate matter zone. Will there be a air quality study that deals with particulate matter for this project? I didn't see it on your list.
We haven't required that yet. This project must comply with the design standards and the zoning ordinance requirements. So a number of things are required regarding vegetative screening, air filtration, all within the 250-foot buffer. So we have requirements already that address that.
And the other is I do not see, and I've done a number of major projects that are adjacent to railroads, I don't see a ground-borne vibration study on your list of studies, and that's definitely a big issue when you put residential adjacent to railroads. There's a federal standard of what the maximum ground shaking a residential unit could have adjacent to a railroad. I wasn't sure if you're going to require a ground-borne vibration study.
We haven't as part of projects that I know for environmental review. It could be during the building permit process if that's required in regard to structural engineering and that type. But from a planning standpoint, I haven't had that particular requirement.
I would suggest we make sure one's done so they don't go down this path and find out that they don't meet federal standards. Okay, that's all I have for questions. Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments on the affordability component. The Chamber of Commerce has put on 2 well-attended seminars on private enterprise, multi-unit developments, partnering with businesses in town who would then take over the lease requirements for a certain number of units. And there was a big turnout from the business community because there are businesses in town that can't afford to build, but they would like to have some housing for their employees. So just throwing this out there, but I think the Chamber of Commerce is acting as a nexus for that. From your perspective, it's good because you've got them all filled up on a long-term lease and that's their commitment and you don't have to worry about it. They maintain those 4 units. So that's something that you might want to think about. The second thing is, for me, the ADA is, it never meets my standards personally unless it's going in the front door. And when ADA has to go in the back door, I'm always a little concerned. And the ADA access for this is going in what I would call the back door, certainly as insofar as coming from Cabrillo Boulevard. It's not going into that area where your roundabout is. If I understand correctly, it's going all the way down Channel Drive and coming in with the cars. I'm just suggesting to give an idea to the fact that the ADA is not subjected yet again to a rear entrance, but comes in what looks like it's the front one. And in that regard, the Coastal Commission, with whom I have minimal but long-term understanding, I think that Chair Bauke is correct. All residential will not meet necessarily open arms from the Coastal Commission because they want this to be, visitor serving, et cetera, et cetera. One of the ways around that is to create public space of some sort. And that area where the roundabout is, right off of Cabrillo Boulevard, may be a place to reconsider how you're grading it such that a plaque or a statue or a memento of some sort with regard to the history and or the coastal usage could go in there and ameliorate the ways in which the Coastal Commission accepts you or not. Because right now I think you need to, we're talking about turning your face to the street. The facing of the cemetery is beautiful. Those sandstone walls are beautiful. And the visual going through the iron gate is beautiful in a public way. So that would be something I would suggest you could think about. And then my last comment is, I think it's brilliant. I don't know if we're all thinking this way I am, but this is a great concept for the cemetery to create an endowment for themselves. And I think this should be trumpeted a little bit more because every business is going to run into these kind of things. My last is, do you guys collect the lease? Does the cemetery collect the lease on the cell tower? Because those things are rented typically, right? Okay, so that's another form of income on that property. Okay, and thank you very much. And I want to double down on what my fellow commissioner here, Madam Mayor, said about kids. Didn't look like it was kid-oriented enough, and certainly you'll probably have kids. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we in comment period? Or
Since it's a concept review, we'll consider it.
Okay.
It could be a commentary if you'd like.
Okay. I actually had a question for Commissioner Barnwell. When you talk about, and I think it's a good idea, a plaque or celebrate something in the roundabout, you're talking about the main roundabout. You're not talking about the little roundabout on this site, right?
I'm talking about wherever it works in architecturally correct, but the roundabout on this site, when it interfaces with the street, has an open green area where the staircase is, where the public would come in fresh off of Cabrillo Boulevard. I don't know exactly where it is, but somewhere along the project.
So you're talking about this roundabout on the
I
site?
am talking about this one.
Okay, okay. I thought maybe you were talking about the roundabout that's being constructed now. Okay, okay. Thank you. I'll just go through my comments since I have the mic. I think widening the parkway from 4 feet to something a little bit more substantial is appropriate, per Chair Bauke's suggestion, particularly with all the trees, and the trees are going to be very important. We need to show tree replacement ratios. I prefer in the mix of affordable units to have 1 studio and 2 2-bedrooms and 1 3-bedroom. I think that's more flexibility for people of, 80% AMI. I just think it works out better. So that would be my preference. I really like the idea about kind of celebrating the coastal zone in that roundabout, and maybe that's a way to get around R3 versus HRC2 with the Coastal Commission. But I think, in the end, I think staff needs to evaluate that and make a I know you're making a recommendation to us for R3, but I think, just looking at maybe initial comments from them on that, if you take it to have you taken it to staff at the Coastal Commission?
Actually, we have reached out to them and haven't received comments back yet.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the way to go, so there's no pushback there. I greatly appreciate the fact this is a local team. I think that's very important on a site like this. It's quite a visible site. I'll be anxious to see. I agree with Commissioner Lodge. I think, if there's going to be kids here, and we need to have places for kids. So I would be looking forward to seeing the more development of what those spaces look like and where they are. I don't know if I said anything about the tree. I did say something about tree replacement ratios. So, and I appreciate the permeable pavement. I think there's probably ways to deal with the ADA access from Channel Drive to celebrate it as an entrance for people, as an accessible entrance. So I think that needs to be studied further. I like the architecture. I think the concept is nice. I like the, whatever it's called, the verneuf. And I think that's playful and interesting and could be really well done. And I guess, and I certainly support the initiation request. Am I supposed to add anything else? I know the questions were on page 8, I think, of our, is the project suitable for a housing project? Yes. I think it will be when the studies are done and we study the acoustics and the other issues. I think the density is appropriate. Yes, I support the initiation. I would prefer the zone to R3, but I think hearing back from the staff at the Coastal Commission will be important to that. And I think I've commented on the plans, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Could I ask that be switched over to my questions here I want to put up on the screen for the commissioners?
Thank you. Commissioner Warlow, followed by Commissioner DeLuccio.
Thank you, Chair Bauke, and thank you to the applicant. This is a great first step in this, and I'm extremely excited to see a piece of land that is currently very, very underutilized be put forward with a project that would meaningfully move forward with our housing goals. So props to you guys, and also that it is actually benefiting the cemetery, which is a huge community benefit that's been here forever, and giving some economic viability back to them. In terms of the questions proposed by staff, is the project site suitable for housing project? I definitely think so. I think this is a very appropriate site that would really kind of uplift this area that we're all investing a lot into right now anyways in terms of the livability of this intersection. I am supportive of the density proposed and the zone that's proposed for R3. In terms of the project design, I do really like the varied approach to the heights of the buildings. I think that I appreciate the way in which you're proposing a number of different types of unit sizes. And to Commissioner Wiscombe's point, I agree with more varied levels of the units for affordable units. And again, appreciate the effort around the affordability piece. In terms of kids, I do think, given that this is a pretty busy intersection and we are very close to public benefits like the beach where kids can go, if you all would consider, some type of playground or things like that that could be on site, I think that would be appropriate for this type of development. Understanding that we are near the bike path and a big thing that everyone is excited about, especially the investments that are going into the underpass and trying to make this more of a bikeable area. I think ensuring that there's, spaces for bikes and that that's all encouraged in this as well is important. I agree, I like the design from the meandering kind of street perspective. I think that's very Santa Barbara, and again, to Commissioner Wiscombe always hits all the good points. The permeable pavement, I think that's a good, I know that's more expensive than other approaches, so I appreciate when developers move forward with that type of direction. And then in terms of just the entry point, I think preserving our historic landmark that's there is important, and then kind of complementing that in whatever design you guys move forward with in terms of the entry will be important as well. Obviously, from a neighborhood compatibility perspective, it seems like you've very much earned the trust of your most prominent neighbor, so that's wonderful. And I think that, continuing to work with the city and all of the infrastructure developments that are happening with Highway 101 and with the railroad will be important, but I think this is a really great first step, and I'm really excited. So I've driven by this forever, and I've always been like, nothing is being used here. So this is a really great example of really utilizing underserved areas. So thank you.
Commissioner DeLucia.
These guys are a hard act to follow today. So as far as the, I know that I think Commissioner Bonwell, you mentioned something about recognizing the site with a plaque or something. Maybe you can even do that with the fountain, incorporate that into the fountain or something. I do have a question. How come I'm really pleased that it's going to be housing. How did you determine between residential and not making it condominiums? Did you even consider that, or was it always on the table for residential?
Yeah, I think the overwhelming need is for rent housing, not for sale housing. And then due to our structure with the cemetery being a ground lease, it's really hard to sell ground lease condos. So those are the two reasons for that.
Okay. I said it is suitable for housing. I like the way the affordable will be dispersed among the entire property, and I like Commissioner Wiscombe's your comment about how we can maybe make it two bedrooms, one studio and one 3-bedroom. Yeah, I kind of like that approach. If we can upgrade that a little bit. And I also appreciate the chair's concern about the environmental reports. And I do realize that the application is not complete, and the study, and all the environmental work has not even been completed yet. So, so if you can take the chair's comments into consideration, that'd be very much appreciated. And another question, will the complex be gated? Because it goes back to the safety of the kids.
To be determined. Yeah, to be determined. We don't know yet.
Okay. So obviously, I'm for the housing. I'm for the density is appropriate. I think the design is wonderful against so well developed, and we're so early in the process. And I know it's going to go to HLC, and they'll flesh all that out. As far as the zoning, I would prefer it to be R3. However, I understand the concern of some of my fellow commissioners when it goes to the Coastal Commission just to have R3. And I think pretty much I agree with everybody else's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, bullets 1, 2, and 3? The answer is yes. And my comments on the proposed project plans are that I really like them. And Chair Bauke expressed some concern about the front doors being on the back of the building. They're not really on the back of the building, it's on the south side, because you're creating a separate little community of its own, and I think it's very appropriate that the entries be on the driveway side. So, yeah, I was very pleased to see this project, and as has been commented, it does look like Santa Barbara. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think you can tell from my prior comments that I'm supportive of it in every regard, bullets 1, 2, and 3. On bullet number 4, I'm going to reframe a comment I made earlier. I believe that if I lived in that area, in that development, I would be going to the beach a heck of a lot, or to the bird refuge. And I might be getting on the sidewalk and going to Coast Village Road. So I think in terms of the architecture, that's what you should be considering as the path of preference for the pedestrians, thus the ADA access at that end, and any other adornment that can give it a front look where everybody's going to go in and out because they're going to go to the beach. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow with my comments. Okay, as to the project site being suitable for the housing project, yes, I think that's correct, but I believe we need to be tempered with the environmental studies that are yet to be forthcoming. I'm concerned about what those may say. It may be a number of mitigation measures that may be problematic for your cost structure, just putting that out there. So I think from a site, it's a good site for that. The density is fine. I fully support the 20% affordable. In fact, I probably would be less supportive if you for some reason that number drops to 10%. Just be very honest to that one. I think as to the rezoning, I would suggest the HRC too, as what's being proposed, but I'll let staff wrestle with the Coast Commission about that one. And the land use designation changed. I think that's the appropriate, the medium density residential as far as the zoning for that. You heard my comments. I'm concerned about the frontage of building 1 and 2 as far as how they fit the street. I'll let HLC deal with that. And the Woofner, or however you pronounce that word, can either make or break this project. So make sure it makes it. So those are my comments.
Another question.
So Donald, more. Okay.
Yeah, do we need to address the modifications, give direction on that also?
Yes, please.
'Cause after the architect explaining those to us or myself, I can be supportive of the modifications.
Okay, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Ditto.
Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
Yes, ditto.
Ditto here, Mr. Chair.
I believe I already said that I'm supportive of the modifications.
Okay. So we've all made our comments. We don't need to turn this into a motion, do we? Hopefully not. I think you heard our.
Chair Balke, we do for the initiation portion. So we received your general
So
comments.
we put the initiation slides back up. Okay, so would somebody like to make a motion on
Sure.
the initiation?
I'll make a motion. Initiate the zone change from R1 SD3 to R3 SD3 or HRC2, depending upon the communication with Coastal Commission staff. The commission generally, the majority prefers R3 if possible. Initiate the coastal land use designation change from parks open space to medium density residential 12 dwelling units per acre. And please incorporate our comments into the motion. We don't need to go over those again, I don't think, do we?
I'll second that.
Okay. And that's the motion. Thank you. And I guess we have a second.
And I made a second, yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, but
Was there a
I
second?
thought we had a second.
Oh.
We already had a second. Any discussion? My only comment is on the designation to medium density residential versus the HRC to whether or not, should we separate that question out or not?
That's 27 units per acre.
It could be, that's,
But I think most of us thought 12. I think most of us thought 12 dwelling units per acre was appropriate. So how do we handle that?
I'm thinking that you should state what you would like, which is R3.
R3.
And then when this comes back to you, you'll make a recommendation. If your preference is R3, but we will definitely look into Coastal Commission concerns.
Yeah, I think in the motion that I said our preference is R3, and barring any pushback from Coastal Commission staff in your review with them, you could bring it back to us, but is that fair?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
yeah, I'll support it if it's caveated, because my concern is honestly the Coastal Commission's response to the R3 proposal. So I'd support that modification of your motion if,
The majority of the commission that wanted R3.
right. So, do you need
Chair
clarification?
Balky, if you can give me just 1 minute to
Okay.
discuss with staff. Commissioner Balky, and this perhaps might be something also for the city attorney to weigh in. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to page 6 of the staff report. So the reasoning in part for staff's recommendation for R3 over HRC was that the HRC zone in its basic terms, does not require residential. It only requires residential uses within 2 specific zones and certain overlay zones. So if we were to go with an HRC2 zone, it would also require zoning ordinance amendment to allow for residential in this location as well. So my question for city attorney or commission is, do we need it, any discussion on whether or not there would be support to not just do HRC2, but also that rezone to allow residential in this specific area?
I would think that would be totally, we're all supporting residential, so I think we
yes.
all would support that
Okay.
specific
I think that
language
suffices.
change,
Yeah, I just wanted
be-
to be clear, given the Coastal Commission, if one staff confers with Coastal Commission staff, if that is the option, just that we don't have to come back for a further initiation discussion.
Makes sense. Okay.
Thank you.
So you can just incorporate that in the motion then, right?
I see consensus, so please do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so may I have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Chair Balky. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner DeLucia?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Vice Chair Wardlow?
Yes.
Chair Balky?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you sometime in the future. I'm not sure how long that'll be. All right, moving, and Ms. Kennedy, thank you for bringing this item to us. Next is the administrative agenda. The staff hearing liaison, officer liaison, Commissioner Boss is not here, so we will not have that. Do any of the other commissioners who are liaisons to other bodies have anything they would like to report at this time? I have Sheila and then DeLucia would be next. Commissioner Lodge, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On August 7th, the Single Family Design Board reviewed a project at 2503 Medcliff Road, which involves a significant square foot addition to the existing house, and some other changes to the project, to the existing project. Because of its location in the coastal zone, it will be coming to the Planning Commission for approval of a coastal development permit.
Okay, Commissioner DeLucia.
Yeah, okay, I have a report from HLC, yesterday's meeting, actually. 3805 State Street, I'm going to talk about Macy's site just a little bit, because an archaeological report had come before the commission, which, and they accepted the report. But then they of course discussed it a little further. The formal application has been submitted for the site, for the Macy's site. It's currently incomplete. And an agenda item for development agreement, I believe, is scheduled to come before the council this month. So that was something new I learned. Next week. Then they also talked about 1501 Francisci Road House, and that's in Francisci Park, and it's a pre-application review. The majority of the commissioners are in favor of demolition of the house to be placed with a garden terrace in the house's footprint. The landscape, they like the landscaping, they're going to save some of the trees, but they'd like to see it less like a memorial and more like a celebration. And then and also to be ADA compliance, of course, and not to obstruct the views, because if you go up there, it's all about those views. So that's my report.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask just a question on
Sure.
to Commissioner DeLucia? Were there a lot of public comment speakers on this item?
No, just a couple.
A couple, okay.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of people who came out. There was somebody who came out and wanted to save the house, and they were actually built houses in Italy.
Okay.
But otherwise, the other speakers were complimentary about the project in
Yeah.
general.
I, in my prior years on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I spent 7 years, I think we brought this up several times, and it's really nice to see it finally moving forward to this point. It's about time. It's been an albatross for a long time, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is discussions on subcommittees and workshops, and I know that a couple of the commissioners have mentioned, and we've had a couple off-calendar conversations of some of them about the need for a legislative update. So can we get that on before there's another whole pile that you're going to have to be bringing before us? Because, September's coming soon, and we know what they do in Sacramento in September is pass more laws that we have to deal with.
Chair
So,
Bauke, yeah, I think we can. I'm not sure I can get it in September, but when all the new bills come out in October, I can, put something on the calendar for you all.
Okay, thank you. Because we're starting to get some kind of we'll call it alphabet soup issues that we're starting to lose track of what's what nowadays, and they all seem to have threes in them for some reason. So I'm not quite sure.
All I need is a glossary. That's all I really need.
Yeah, you need
If someone give me
like
just
a cheat sheet.
A cheat
Okay.
sheet. That's all
Okay.
I really need.
Okay.
Call it numerical numbness.
Okay. We'll take whatever, actually, that's a very good term. Okay, with that, I'd like to adjourn our meeting at 2:29. This concludes the August 15th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, August 29th. Thank you for being here, and have a nice day.